I want to move from a more general pedagogic to the more structural practical, and we'll continue with Andrea Arbel, who heads the Partnership Together program of the Jewish Agency. Bevakasha, Andrea.
Am I on? Yes, you hear me? Great. I have to tell you that ever since, is my microphone on? Yes? Ever since Shlomi Ravid and others started talking about Jewish peoplehood. Oh, now I thought something was missing. Ever since Shlomi Ravid and others really started talking about Jewish peoplehood, and I kept on kind of like, kind of nagging at his shirt here and saying, but Shlomi, we have the ultimate Jewish peoplehood program, Partnership Together, which was, maybe some of you know it as Partnership 2000. We rebranded a year ago, and as I say, from Partnership 2000 to Partnership Together. And I was saying, this is us, Shlomi, this is us, look at us. You have to study us and look at us. And I think that the fascinating thing, are there people out there that have never heard of Partnership Together or Partnership 2000? Everybody knows? Just in case somebody's not raising their hand, I think we're akin to being a Jewish sister-city relationship. But when we started 15 years ago, and I think that this is the fascinating thing, we didn't start out as being a Jewish peoplehood program in the likes of what we've been hearing now. It was really, in a sense, the old paradigm. It was still about the overseas communities investing in Israel, and that the chidush, the new part of it, is that it was going to be somewhere specific so that there would be a name, a place, somewhere in Israel that communities could be connected with and committed to and really care about. Not just amorphous Israel, but Cleveland with Bet Sha'an or Pittsburgh with Carmiel. And it worked. And it worked in a big way. Today we have 45 partnerships connecting 97 regions in Israel with 550 Jewish communities overseas. But the beauty of the partnership, I think, is that it's changed and it's been very responsive to the changing environment that we live in. And when you look at what we do today, it's not about, like it was 15 years ago, about 70% being economic development and social welfare. It switched. And 70% of our work is about people-to-people programming. And what do I mean by that? It could be connecting individuals. It could be connecting youth and joint programming. I'm looking at Smadar. It could be connecting JCCs with matnasim, even trilaterals around the world. But what we're solely dedicated to is connecting individuals, organizations, communities in a very interactive way. What really helped make that transition away from the old paradigm, in a sense, to the Jewish, what I call the Jewish peoplehood paradigm, and by the way, our tagline is Partnership Together, the Jewish Agency's Jewish Peoplehood Platform. And without the second Jewish, I think. And I think what really helped us make that transition was actually something that in the beginning was almost a technical change, but for us clearly created a change of essence. And is that the lay leadership, every partnership has a steering committee. I don't want to go into the details of it. But up until about 7 years ago, the Israeli leadership on the joint steering committee were the mayors. So the mayors are good people, but what do? They bring to the table the very legitimate needs of the region. That's what they get paid to do. So you can imagine that the conversation around the table was about, again, the communities helping support the local needs. We made a change 7 years ago, and today the leadership, the Israeli leadership, is lay leadership, just like in the overseas communities. Wonderful volunteers, the creme de la creme of Israeli society. And what happened is it changed to a Jewish peoplehood conversation. It changed into a conversation about us. It's amazing that the Israelis sitting around the table want to understand that there are challenges. You were talking about intermarriage. There's lots of challenges for the Jewish people, and that they understand that Israel, that engagement with Israel is one of the main anchors for helping sustain a vibrant world Jewry. It's not the only answer. I would think that over the past couple of thousand years, if there was one answer for sustaining world Jewry, we would have discovered it by now. But what we do know since the rise of the State of Israel, that is one major anchor for the engagement of overseas Jewry with Israel, and also Israelis with overseas Jewry. I can tell you that when we have mifgashim, when we have these encounters, the Israelis will always tell you, I walked into the encounter as an Israeli and I left as a Jew. That is no small order, My daughter, I'll tell you just a short story. My daughter, about quite a few years ago, went on what was a partnership mission. At that time, I had nothing to do with it. And she went to Washington. She was 14 years old, and she went to dance at the Maccabi games. I called her up after 3 days, and I said, Sivani, how are you? She says to me, Iman. She grew up here, okay? You can hear. I hope you can hear. I'm originally from the United States. She grew up in a home with English, went to visit her family. And I said, so, Sivan, how are you? She says, Iman, the Jewish people here are really nice. And I almost had a heart attack thinking, okay, we're not religious, but the child doesn't realize that she's Jewish. But what that was for me was my 14-year-old daughter at the time saying, wow, I understand that the people here in Washington embraced me, took me in because I'm Israeli and I'm a Jew and I'm wowed by it, Ima. That's what she was trying to say for me. And that is the experience that we have. Through partnership, we are an Israel experience with Israeli. I think that's the cherry that we have, and that's what oftentimes makes school twinning programs or the programs that we have with JCCs and Matnasim. Literally thousands and thousands. We have 350,000 participants in partnership every year, even more actually. And that is the powerful experience that they have together, that we become us, they understand they're one family, and that what I can do on my own is not what I can do with you. You talk about food, you talk about sharing meals, you talk about having wine. These are the moments, and maybe it's not academic in nature, but in addition to having doctors and doctors doing joint programming together, what I can tell you is what really leaves an impression on them is the shared meals that they have, the cup of coffee that they have. For oftentimes, there can be people from overseas that come to Israel, and they've been here many, many times, but through the mifkashim that we have, it is the first time that they've had a real, meaningful opportunity to sit down with Israelis like Shlomi and myself, because otherwise they simply don't have that opportunity to talk about one another. 2 years ago, we did a vision process that one of the outcomes was the rebranding. And the vision process was amazing. We started out by gathering all of the, as I say, the chairs that we had in Israel. And if I tell you, I had butterflies in my stomach before, because even though I knew my chairs, my Israeli chairs, I was still kind of scared that if they got into the room, were they still going to talk about we want more money coming to our communities? And I'll tell you the truth, I was really concerned about it. What came out after a day and a half is that the only thing they wanted to know was what more can we be doing for the overseas communities? We're strong. Does every community have needs? Yes. Do American Jewish communities have needs? Yes. But that's not the point. What more can we be doing? Because we understand engagement here helps strengthen the Jewish people. It's good for Israel. It's good for overseas communities. It's good for the Jewish people. And I'm just going to read you what the vision is, because I can tell you 15 years ago, you would have never heard these words, okay? This was a collaborative effort of our overseas lay leadership and professional leadership, as well as here. A couple of hundred people, so our vision statement's a little long. So our vision is, of partnership together, a global and united Jewish people made up of a rich tapestry of strong, vital, flourishing, interconnected Jewish individuals, families, and communities, which enriches Jewish continuity and identity with Israel at its heart. And I took a minute, as you can see, this is not totally copy edited, but when you get about 250 people to take part, you know, it's amazing that we got it honed down to this. But as you can see in that statement, the focus is Jewish identity. It's about Jewish peoplehood. So once you have a new vision statement, you say, okay, as professionals really get nervous and say, okay, so what's going to change? What's going to look different 3 years down the road when we look back and say, was it worth all this effort to do a vision and a mission and a purpose? And our purpose, by the way, is to be an international platform for the engagement of Jewish communities with Israel. What we did is a mapping. We wanted to understand, if we're a platform, what does that mean? And we said, okay, it's not enough just to be connecting Israel with the communities overseas. We did a mapping. We got an understanding of all the organizations through partnership that is engaged with Israel. And we discovered we have 100 day schools and 100 afternoon schools, supplementary schools, almost 100 JCCs, 150 synagogues. Wow, this was a wow moment. We didn't realize that we're engaging so many organizations in such a meaningful way. And one of the outcomes is that if we have 400 schools that are engaged in school twinning, we are now creating an international, we launched it in December, an international school twinning network that takes the 400 schools, that's huge, that are already engaged in school twinning and taking it one step further. That's a whole nother panel discussion for us at another time. The other unique added value that we discovered in our mifkashim was home hospitality. This is one of the things that people kind of think is superficial. These are kind of the things that people say, well, it's nice to have. No, it's much more important than just nice to have. These are the reasons when you have friends in the region, because you spend time in people's homes. This is the reason why people from Britain will go back for the 15th time to Shlomi. When was Shlomi? When was the last time you were in Shlomi? I don't, probably a long time ago. And why is that, the only reason why people from Miami will go back for the 7th and 8th time to Yerucham, for example, it's because they have friends and family there. And it's because they get together. Yes, they do joint activity, which is very concrete, which is very, with a clear structure, with real goals. But I will tell you, the reason they come back is because they've had meals and shared food and shared stories, and they feel that they have family in Israel and vice versa. So to us, when we do this in 45 partnerships every day around the world, that for us, it's growing and developing Jewish peoplehood. Thank you.
Thank you. Achona Chaviva, Diana Ginsberg, who is the director of Jewish Service Learning, got it right, of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Bevakasha.
Thank you very much. For the last couple of years, actually prior to assuming my position at the Jewish Agency, I've been privileged to be part of a lived experiment in Jewish peoplehood known as Siach. Siach means discourse in Hebrew. It is a global network of Jewish social justice and environmental activists, which is anchored in a series of conferences that take place around the world and also has regional gatherings and webinars in between conferences in order to foster ongoing connections between Jewish social justice and environmental activists from Europe, North America, and Israel. What I'd like to do in the short amount of time that I have with you is to tell you a little bit about the genesis of this initiative, because it points to the particular need that it attempts to address, and then a couple of lessons that we've learned in the last couple of years building and launching this network. Just over a year ago, we just had the second conference in Jerusalem last week. The year was 2008, and I was executive director of an Israeli nonprofit organization known as B'Ma'agalei Tzedek, Circles of Justice, that combines activism within Israeli society, social action, and Jewish identity. And I was traveling to the United States in the end of November, the beginning of December, for what was supposed to be a fundraising meeting. But if you think back to late 2008, you will recall that that was when the world's economic situation was tanking, and my trip was ill-timed with the break of the Madoff story. And so I very quickly decided to change my course during that trip. And instead of focusing on fundraising, I decided to meet with kindred spirits in the Jewish social justice community in North America. Even though I am originally from North America, my entire career has been in the Jewish social justice community here in Israel. And what I discovered after sitting with a variety of partners, senior staff members and lay people in the Jewish social justice community in North America, is that there was a tremendous amount in common between the world that I knew here in Israel and that world and community in North America. First and foremost, there were similar values. People were drawing upon the values of tzedek, of tikkun olam, of caring for the widow and the orphan and the stranger in our midst. Above and beyond that, there were similar methodologies. People were using community organizing, advocacy, lobbying, Jewish education. Above and beyond that, there were similar target populations. Everyone was working with disenfranchised or marginalized populations, whether they were working in Los Angeles or they were working in downtown Tel Aviv. Moreover, there was similar leadership. If you look at the heads of the organizations in North America and in Israel, what you will discover is that by and large, the people are people who are in their 20s and 30s, younger than some of the larger, more established organizations on the Jewish communal scene. And last but not least, I discovered that there were overlapping donors. Many of the funders who were funding the Jewish social justice community in North America were the very same funders who were funding that work in Israel. And yet, despite this very large common ground, What I discovered in that trip in late November 2008 was that there was very little information sharing or collaboration going on. And when I began to scratch beneath the surface of why that was the case, I discovered that it wasn't just because partnership is difficult, as we well know, but because specifically within the Jewish social justice community, both Jewish Peoplehood and a shared conversation with Israeli colleagues was particularly thorny and difficult. Simultaneous to this discovery, I had a conversation with the New York Federation, which was one of our funders, and they have been thinking about how to bring together people who have shared content but do not necessarily have shared connections. And independently, they had identified this group of Jewish social justice activists as being a group that could potentially do what John spoke about earlier, people who had already fallen in love with the same thing. They wake up, they breathe, they eat, they sleep, tzedek and tikkun olam, but had not yet met people overseas who had already fallen in love with the very same thing. And so the New York Federation at that point in time challenged me and said, if you are serious about this, then think of an initiative that would attempt to tackle this. And not only think of an initiative that would attempt to tackle this, think of a process that would embody the very values that you espouse of Jewish peoplehood. So it cannot just be a top-down effort by a small grassroots Israeli organization alone. Find a counterpart organization in North America and a counterpart organization in Europe that would be willing to invest in this together. Easier said than done, particularly in the North American scene when Israel was such a hot button or third rail topic within the Jewish social justice community. But luckily, there were two amazing partners, Chazon in North America, whom Bill spoke about earlier, and the Jewish Social Action Forum in the United Kingdom, which is an umbrella organization of a variety of Jewish social justice organizations there. It took about 2 years prior to the launch of the first conference to get all of our pieces in order. And when I came to the staff of the Ma'agalei Tzedek, after 2 years about talking about this, with the amazing news that this initiative had been funded and will be launched, and that the grant was a grant that was something like 6 times larger than any grant we had received before, the response that I got was as follows. A young woman on my staff who was named by Haaretz as one of the top 50 social justice activists in this country, a woman who grew up in the religious Zionist community, identified with B'nai Akiva, turned to me, and after announcing that actually we had got this grant and we're going to be moving forward, launching an international network of Jewish social justice activists, said to me, Diana, do you really care about Jews outside of Israel? And that question was a question that just brought home the point of why this initiative was significant. I want to fast forward to 2 overarching lessons that we have learned in the thick and muck and mire of a lived experiment in Jewish peoplehood over the last couple of years. The first is that Jewish peoplehood is not necessarily, and this may be an understatement, is not necessarily an effective marketing hook for certain populations, but a profound experience of Jewish peoplehood gets people coming back for more. As Shlomi alluded to in his introductory remarks, and as I said beforehand, the notion of being part of an exclusively Jewish conversation for many of the Israelis was not intuitive. And for many of the Jewish social activists around the world, to have a conversation that put a focus or the limelight on Jewish peoplehood felt like it wasn't organic in terms of the work that we were doing. And yet, it was precisely because of that we wanted to bring this group of people together. In the initial conversations that I had with many of the members of the network who were invited to the first conference, 120 were invited to the first conference, 120 to the second conference, of which approximately 60% were returnees and 40% new individuals. Whenever I would use the terms Jewish peoplehood, for the most part, it just didn't resonate. People were interested in coming to be with people who loved the same thing. They were not interested in having a meta conversation about what does it mean to be part of a larger Jewish collective. And yet, that experience of meeting people from around the world who care about the same thing was so profound that it is that experience, not the professional development aspects of the conference and the network, that have people talking about this and coming back for more. And the second overarching theme, if the first was how to attract and keep the people who are far from the usual suspects, the second is we should be aiming for the highest common multiple, not the lowest common denominator in terms of the conversations that we have. We could have easily just focused on the safe conversations, the things that bring us together and the commonalities of our work. But if we did not talk about the elephants in the room, the taboo topics of Israel, then we wouldn't have been authentic in terms of having real conversations that people felt met the real concerns that they had about coming to the shared table at the very same time. And just to touch upon something that Bill had mentioned earlier in terms of sacred ritual, not only was it significant in terms of having elephant in the room conversations, we also needed to capitalize upon sacred rituals that, if improperly done, could polarize the group, but if properly done, could bring people together. I was very skeptical as to whether this conference should take place over a Shabbat, because we attempted to bring together people spanning the religious spectrum, Orthodox, Reform, secular, and I did not believe that the Israeli and European contingents knew how to do pluralism the way that our North American counterparts did. And yet the sacred ritual of Shabbat in its full diversity and richness was such a profound experience for people that even though it could have gone the other way, our attempt to do it well, to display the diversity of the people in the room, was something that was profound for many of the people. So that, in a nutshell, is some of the thoughts. And in the questions and answers, I'd be happy to answer more.
So I'm afraid we don't have time for questions and answers, but I'll take two quick comments from the audience, and I think I have to wrap it up because I think on 7:30 we have to get on the buses. Yes, please.
Hi, Sean Landers. I was just, as I was listening in particular to Bill and Diana, I was reflecting on the commonalities as well that you both touched on. Lived relationships, especially with others, as opposed to what sometimes feels like an abstract or artificially boundaried or bounded idea of peoplehood. And whether it's the other as the non-Jew or the other as the non-Israeli or the the person in or outside the environmental conversation, let's say, the power of what you said, I thought, was that the actual lived relationship and the rituals that are performed there, but also the ways in which our Jewishness gets expressed through those direct relationships is, to me at least, far more powerful than the abstract ideas that tend to hold us back.
Thank you. There was another hand over here. Khan. Yes. Go.
Both the balance between the two conceptual and the two practice things was a beautiful balance, and I just found it wonderful. And, I just want to also tell you that that small audience in relationship to the largeness of the issue, this is being shown on the channel, and it's going to go on the website. So I just want you to know that your impact will be on more than just the people who are present here. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of us here.
Thank you. So this is a good segue to thanking all the panel participants, to thanking you, but also, and this was very important, this was an example of how us professionals, practitioners, can actually move the field forward. And as part of a general effort to move the conversation from what is Jewish peoplehood to how do we actually nurture it? How do we actually implement peoplehood in practice? It is actually in our hands. May this be a fruitful conference. Thank you all.